I appreciate it. I want to make sure this is on. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you. Thanks. I appreciate it. I made sure I told the guys, don't give me the little fancy round thing. Give me this. So I appreciate that, you guys. And out of everything, the first thing, I mean, we worry about coming up here and talking and forgetting of what to say, but I can tell myself, the guys have to sit down, so the first thing I'm going to do is pray, because it's the first thing. I'll just start talking and forget that they're standing here. So I'm just going to quickly pray so that they can have a seat. God, I just thank you for your blessings. Thank you that I'm obedient to this call. And I pray, Lord, that whatever I say, Lord, will be impactful for the people who are here. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you that the testimonies that I'm going to share today will be a blessing to others. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen. So thank you all so much for being here. I'm wearing, it's another thing I was wearing. What am I going to wear today? And then I remember it's the fourth Sunday, and I put on this shirt. So anyone who's representing their God-centered today? Is there any other God-centered in the house back there? What about the life after depth? Okay. We got refocus, recover, refocus, rebuild. We have training to win, beyond limits, eternity. And eternity. So for those who are new to the church, we love Fourth Sundays where we're able to represent our favorite T-shirts. And again, thank you all for being here this morning. For those who came and expect Pastor Ron, I'll do a good job, I think. I'm going to try. I'm Jamaican, you can probably tell. So I talk really fast, and then sometimes really slow. So, it depends on how I'm feeling. So today, if I get excited, you can say, hey, slow down, sister, and I can try. But I'm so happy to be here today. Someone mentioned a while back that they don't really hear from me. I'm definitely present, but I don't talk much. I'm in and out. If you catch me talking after service, that's a good thing, because I'm like, hello, and I'm out. But then I realized that I've lived some things, and there's no reason for me to hold all that in. So I'm going to be very personal. I even brought my journal today. I'm going to be reading some things out of my journal. I'm going to get that personal. And that's because I realize that my life can be a blessing to others, or I can save you from something. So I'm going to talk about my marriage. I'm also going to talk about my career, and I'm going to talk about my life as a ministry leader. And then Arthur's going to take us away in prayer. So just, I'm hoping again that I'll be a blessing to you all. So I've been married for 23 years to thank you all, to the love of my life. His name is Aaron Blake. And if he tells the story, I pursued him, but I know he wanted me, y'all. I know it. I mean, you're Jamaican, a little spice, a little, whatever. But I remember having a list of things that I wanted in my marriage, and I had a long, long checklist, and then God said, I'm not sure about all that. So I have some verses that I'm going to go through in the Bible. I'm going to talk about some stories, and I'm going to talk about Aaron. I'm also going to talk about my career. I spent 16 years in the school district, 8 years in the classroom, and 8 years as an administrator. And the health issues I had as a result of that, so I'm going to talk about that. And I'm going to talk about finding this church on dirt road. Is there any other dirt roaders? Is that a word? I'm not sure. In the building. I'm going to talk about that and the struggles I've had in ministry. And then I'm just going to end with some stories. So because I was a language arts teacher, I love stories. If anything goes wrong with the job that I have now, and they say go back and teach reading and writing and stories, I'd love to do that, because that's my favorite thing. There's nothing like being in the story and seeing yourself in the story. Like, I read this one, and I know I'm nothing like Michelle Obama. I'm not trying to compare at all. Like, this is a diva here. But she was a lawyer and started doing some advocacy work when she was working for a hospital. And some of the things that she talked about inspired me. So I just want to mention all that. Also, because I was an educator, I always feel that if you hear my voice all the time, people kind of tune out. So I do have Germ and Selena helping me today. So if you hear some other voices, that they're over there, they have their microphone ready, and they're going to be reading all the obviously the verses will be on the screen. And also, before I even go into some of my stories, I have some specific things written down that I don't want to forget to say. So if I look down, a little bit, it's because I want to make sure that I share some things. But then also, I'm going to be sharing from the heart. Okay? All righty. And again, I won't be up here long. So the first thing I want to get into is 1 Kings 17, 7 through 24. 1 Kings 17, 7 through 24. I really like this Bible verse because they never said her name. She was just known as the widow. But oh my gosh, this widow speaks into my marriage today. You ready? 1 Kings 17, 7 through 24.
Hello? Hello? Oh, okay, cool. Sometime later, the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. Then the word of the Lord came to him. Go at once, Zarephath, in the region of Sidon, and stay there. I have directed a widow there to supply you with food. So he went to Zarephath. When he came to the town gate, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and asked, would you bring me a little water in a jar so I may have a drink? As she was going to get it, he called, and bring me, please, a piece of bread. As surely as the Lord your God lives, she replied, I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. I am gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. Elijah said to her, don't be afraid. Go home, do as you have said. But first make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me. And then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land. She went away and did as Elijah had told her. So there was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and her family. For the jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word of the Lord spoken by Elijah. Sometime later, the son of the woman who owned the house became ill. He grew worse and worse, and finally stopped breathing. She said to Elijah, what do you have against me, man of God? Did you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son? Give me your son, Elijah replied. He took him from her arms, carried him to the upper room where he was staying, and laid him on his bed. Then he cried out to the Lord, Lord my God, have you brought tragedy even on this widow I am staying with by causing her son to die? Then he stretched himself out on the boy 3 times and cried out to the Lord, Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him. The Lord heard Elijah's cry, and the boy's life returned to him, and he lived. Elijah picked up the child and carried him down from the room into the house. He gave him to his mother and said, look, your son is alive. Then the woman said to Elijah, now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth.
Thank you. So I'm going to read a couple things to you that I have in my notes, and then I'm going to share some things about the love of my life, Aaron Blake. So at the end of my hope and at the end of your hope, I believe, is the middle of God's story. This woman was a Gentile widow living outside of Israel. She was outside of the protections of Jewish law and would have been among most likely the poor and needy. And she was a single mom. She found herself at the end of her supplies and at the end of her ability to provide. Reasoning her only choice was to make a last meal to eat and die. But God's resources are unlimited, and I believe that his timing is perfect. We may not see a way through, but we should never be hopeless. So I imagine the widow watching her flour and the oil decrease for weeks, and she had just a handful of flour, and probably even if she shook it out of the container or turned the oil upside down, that eventually she thought she was going to die. Before she reached, though, the place of her need, I know that God knew that he would meet the need. Although her flour was getting low, God knew that Elijah would come. And although the oil was running thin, God knew Elijah would come as well. And she head out to gather the sticks for the last meal, but I know that God knew that Elijah would come. God knows how he will meet our needs, and he will provide guidance as you need it. He will provide wisdom as you need it. God will provide you comfort as you need it. God will provide for you financially as you need it. And God will provide grace to sustain you as you need it. And he will provide for every circumstance as you need it. And I think for her, I believe that God was more interested in feeding her soul than feeding her stomach. But when she started trusting God with everything she had, that's when he started to provide. So Paul is going to put up a photo of myself and Aaron. And it's a little difficult for you to see. And my daughter took this photo years ago, but that's Miss Evie, and that's Pastor Ron, and that's Aaron and I. And that is in the dirt road where on right close to midnight, you stand with your partner, and Pastor Ron asks you to do your vows. Do you all like that? Oh, I love it. I just, and I felt like I was on top of the world because we were kind of slipping and sliding in and out of being in church, but we found a good church home, and y'all can tell me that I wasn't on cloud nine, that this is it, and we're going to do what we're supposed to do, and he and I were at the right point in our lives, and this was the perfect timing, God's timing, right? My daughter showed me the photo, and it became my screensaver. I got to show it on Facebook, because that's my boo. And, we're in church, and we're doing the right things, and we were at the point, I know, that God was going to make the household look like it should. I'm raising 2 girls, and the interesting part is I want them to see God in him so that they can find spouses like that. You want to set that example. So I know that because I have all these lists, that God was going to look through my list and just check them off one at a time, because that's what God does, right? That was January 1st. January 11th, my phone kept ringing, and it's just the usual thing, Aaron, are you going to pick up the girls today? Aaron, are you going to take out the fish so I can cook it? The same things. But then I looked at it, and I was like, I was trying to leave school at the time, and the phone kept ringing. I picked it up, and I said, because it's coming from, it's like, I've been trying to call you. Are you going to pick up the girls or not? It was a firefighter. He realized that in the phone, you can put spouse or wife, so he wanted to let me know that Aaron had a brain aneurysm, and that when I come home, not to be scared, but your door is on the floor, because what happened is he came home, he called 911 and laid the phone down. So for them to find him, thank God it was an open line, right? So not only did he have a brain aneurysm, when they were trying to repair, he had a stroke. He was in the hospital for 45 days. And although it happened, I thought, look at this. God is just going to show me how he's just going to pull out of this, and we're going to come back and have this great testimony, right? Because, again, I had my checklist. 45 days later, when he was released from the hospital, he probably came to church once or twice, but he was angry. He was so angry that there's a left side deficiency. So my left hand can just move up and down, and I know it's back here, and I know it's in front without even looking at it. But with his left side deficiency, there's this intentionality because all the nerves are dead. He talked about who's going to hire him now because he has this deficiency. Working for yourself, will the county see any concerns and may fire him? And I said, we're going to push through, and it's going to be fine. We had mounting an amount of just bills. 45 days in the hospital is a lot, and of course there's physical therapy after that. But I know that God was going to bring my husband back to the church, and we're going to pray together, and we're going to get through together. That was 2011, and now it's 2023. I'm going to make it through the story without crying, because I feel that when I was at the point where I'm at the highest, that the enemy just took me down. Not only he took him out of church, there's this left side deficiency, there's this sense of hopelessness, and so I pray to get him back to this point where he's in church with me, holding my hand, and that we're saying these vows together. When I walk sometimes in here and I see other couples, that should be me. What did I do, or what did he do for us to be going through this? You know, when I think of this widow and her being hopeless at the point of giving up, in some marriages, especially when a spouse is saved and one is not, there comes conflict, right? I'm on this page and he's on this page, and I'm saying don't say this, and he's saying that, and I'm, you at the church again, and how many hours are you going to be there today, and you know all the things that come along, added pressure, and then I think as my girls are getting older, God, you have to come through. You've done it for others in the Bible. You say that you love him. You've got to come through for him. Then Aaron, just because of just the high blood pressure, that's the reason why he had the brain aneurysm. There's cholesterol issues, diabetes, you name it. And I worry sometimes as he started losing weight, if you take him, will he go to the pits of hell? My love? Oh my God, he's my love. That's the last place that I want him to be at. And God, why aren't you doing this for me as I work in the church, as I try? Why aren't you pouring into me and my husband as you would others? I say all that to say this: as hopeless as I am, my Elijah comes in so many different people. My Elijah is Miss Sabrina when she pours into me as sister to sister and tell me to hang in there. She doesn't say it directly, but I hear her in her stories. Miss Lisa, who's here in the yellow or on that side, has his name written down, and she's my Elijah. So she tells me over and over again, I'm praying for him, and it's going to happen. So I want to make sure that I share for those who are dating especially. Pastor mentioned it the other day about dating, and you think that you're going to change that person, and that person's going to be, your life will change them. We've got to be careful how we marry. Now, I don't regret. He is the love of my life, and I love him with every fiber in my soul. And I know that he loves me as well. And as I see you all sitting in here, I know that one day he's going to be sitting in these chairs. But leading up to that, I have to make sure that I watch myself as well, because every situation happens for a reason. Pastor Ron chastised me the other day. He wasn't talking to me directly, but you know how he's up here and you think he's all in your business? Because you hear he says, you just roll my eyes. But he says something about you can't win them over if you're going to be saying things to them inappropriately or talking out of turn, right? And that's my mouth. I said I was Jamaican, right? Oh. And I think I fail in those areas because I'll be so angry. And then those things come out, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm sorry, honey, I don't mean to. And, but I'm going to continue to walk this walk, and I'm going to continue praying for my Aaron. And I know that as with this widow who was at her very, very last hope, and I feel so hopeless that he's going to come in and he's going to show out. So if there's anyone here, if you're praying for a spouse, if you're praying for that best friend, that sister, that whomever it is, don't give up. And everyone in here is an Elijah. For those who are going through situations, call them up, pour into their lives, let them know it's going to be okay, because God is good and he is forever, forever faithful. Amen. So that's one of my stories. Another story I really like it comes from Genesis 22, 1 through 18. Again, it's Genesis 22, 1 through 18. And I'm going to speak a little bit about my career as an educator and the testing that sometimes that you go through when you're hanging on to something because you feel that's what God wants you to do, and realizing that you were all out of context. So Genesis 22, 1 through 18.
Sometime after later God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he sent out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the 2 of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, "Father?" "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and wood are here," Isaac said, "but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the 2 of them went on together. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar and on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. "Do not lay a hand on the boy," he said. "Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham looked up, and there in the thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, "The Lord will provide." And to this day, on the mountain of the Lord, it will be provided. The angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time and said, "I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring, all nations on earth will be blessed because you have obeyed me."
Thank you. Again, I just have a few notes. I want to make sure that I get it out before I share my story about my career. So God always supplies when he calls, and when we do not understand and there's no way to accomplish the task, God will supply that ram in the bush. And when it appears that obedience is next to impossible, there will also be a ram in the bush. When his calling is above your ability, there will be a ram in the bush. When there appears to be a death in your vision, lift up your eyes and look, there is a ram in the bush. Whenever you've exhausted all your resources, look for the ram in the bush. Maybe you're in an impossible situation, maybe your marriage is at an ugly end, maybe you've reached the end of your financial rope, but I believe that there's no pit so deep that God is not deeper still, or no mountain so high that he's not higher. And remember, for every situation is not out of your reach. Just lift up your eyes. There will be your ram in the bush. 2020 is interesting for me and for many others when we talk about when we start making life changes. Usually when, well, it doesn't happen in every situation, but in my situation it did. My parents moved here very early, I believe it's in the 80s, and left me with an aunt in Jamaica who was an educator. And I said to myself, well, I'll never be a teacher. She doesn't make any money. She's rarely home. She does all, she's gone so much. But anyway, I eventually ended up being an educator, 16 years like I mentioned. And because I may not have control in other areas of my life, say my marriage or other areas, I said I was going to take the bull by the horns and I'm going to make this how I want it to be. So after teaching, they mentioned that I could it's an avid coordinator, so you kind of oversee some things in the school system, as well as getting kids to go to college. I said, okay, I can do that, I can push through. Then they said, well, how, you want to be, an assistant principal? I said, yeah, I can do that too. I remember them choosing me to go to a school that had the highest amount of absences and fights for African American students. But I said, I'm going to go in, I'm going to do my best because this is what God called me to do. Well, that's what I think he says. 2 months into that job, I remember starting taking blood pressure pills because my pressure's through the roof. I remember one day after breaking up a fight, I was standing in the auditorium, and I'm standing, but the room is moving. And I realized, oh, it must be the blood pressure. You guys just need to give me some more. That must be it. But because of the stress, I now have vertigo. Wow. But all they have to do for me was, tell me how wonderful I am. They print a little piece of paper at 8.5 by 11, put a little frame around it, and tell you how wonderful you are, and you feel good, right? It's as if I'm looking for that validation for them. So because they said, okay, I'm going to give you Teacher of the Year, this and that, I felt I can continue pushing through. I don't care how I'm feeling because I'm going to get that principalship. Yeah, I have the assistant principal, but I know that school's out for me. How can I work harder for you? What is it I have to do? Do I need to do, some summer classes? And I went deep. Anything that they asked, Bridgette was going to do it because Bridgette was going to get that school. It's interesting in 2020, when the pandemic hit, in 2020, I started doing a life coaching class with Miss Karen. I'm not sure if everybody remember Miss Karen, but Miss Karen says sometimes you have to really sit and listen and write down what you hear. And I started doing that and did not like what I see. And so I second-guessed everything. Oh, that's not me. I don't know what that is. I don't know where that's coming from. But I wrote this, it must have been probably 11 p.m. at night, and that's my journal there. So I brought my journal in just to read something that I felt that I couldn't have written because this did not sound like me. You were not born to be a principal. Those are your lofty goals. Did you seek me for that decision? You were born to be a leader, but possibly not in that capacity. Continue to work hard at what you do. Don't lose sight in your diligence. You are made to soar in so many other places. Continue to look carefully. You will find your true calling. Don't fear. I will be with you, but don't put yourself in a box. That isn't where I want to find you. Spread your wings and fly. You are fearfully and wonderfully made for more than you can ever hope and dream. Continue to look closely. You have many compartments. Some were made to be a principal. That is all they want, but I want more for you. I remember reading that and calling a friend and saying, listen to this. That's not me, because I know what I want, right? And she says, and you still have that vertigo? Yeah. And you still taking the blood pressure pills? Yeah. And you still working hard? Yeah. But this cannot be me, because I definitely know what I thought God said. I remember asking for a school or interviewing for a school and realizing that because, and I'm just going to be real, because I'm African American and because I'm female, that I belonged in a certain area, but not the one that I'm asking for. You're sassy, or you break up those fights really well, or you work really hard, so I'm going to put you back over here to continue helping at this school site, and the vertigo will go away, and your blood pressure will get better, but you can't get that school site. I remember looking on Indeed, and at the point I didn't even realize that LinkedIn was even a social media app. My daughter said, I'm not sure what you're doing on Indeed, Mama, but you probably need to create a LinkedIn app. And I'm like, I'm not even sure what that is, and no one's going to want me. What am I going to say? If I'm looking for something else, what would I say in that situation? How would I transfer my skills here into just the regular workplace? I was just so confused, so I put it off again. Then she helped me create that LinkedIn site, and I started looking through and I realized that there are some things out there. When Michelle Obama had mentioned being a lawyer, but finding something deeper when she started working for a hospital, and it was community-related, and loving that, I remember, I want that, but they're not going to probably not pay me enough. I'm not sure if I'm going to even fit within that realm, but I started looking, typing in community relations, and things that I wanted to do to make sure that I'm actually walking in, in my purpose. The gentleman called me at the job that I work now, and we did the interview, and I mentioned all that I want to do. And I thought, oh my goodness, after hanging up the phone, this is ridiculous. Actually, after interviewing with him the next day, I looked for another principal job because that's where my comfort zone is. I'm going to hang on to that because I don't see my ram in the bush. I don't think that God was going to help me truly be the best that I can in that area, so I was going to hang on to what I think I should be doing. He called back a few days later, and he said, well, what is it that you want as far as your wages? And I thought, we make pennies on the dollar here. I mean, teachers don't really make a lot, or administrators. But I emailed him what I wanted, and he wrote back, and he said, okay. I said, oh, my goodness, are you kidding me? Then he said, oh, and we're hybrid, so if we're working late, you can come in at 11, or, if you're going to be working late in the evenings, and you can come into the office when you want to. So when I think about the school system, I am in at 7 o'clock, and then I work until 4 or 5, and then, of course, I'm going to go, it's a dance, it's maybe a basketball game or whatever, but I'm working late and getting tired, and here's this man saying, you can give all that up, but I have something else for you. And I remember praying and asking God, is this the right thing for me? Are you sure that this is what will make a difference in my life? And I mentioned it to my husband, and of course, he's thinking, well, we have all these student loans, and eventually, how are we going to pay this off? We get this, this promise that eventually your student loans will be dismissed. It's interesting, after thinking about taking that job, a letter arrives that Biden had erased the loans. Oh, I thought, oh my God, is this the right thing? But there's more than anything there, right? I was like, okay, if that's not it, what else? We bought a home in 2014 that although I lived in, I was barely in, to be honest with you. I woke up late, woke up late, I was in, woke up early, came back late, rarely walked in the backyard, rarely lived like I should, but yet I was hanging on to something that I think if I hang on to tightly enough, God will promote me to something else when God was having something better for me. So eventually, I took the job, and y'all, I'm sitting on a Zoom call with a chicken in the oven, which is so good. My laundry is done by sometimes Tuesday or Wednesday, when laundry used to pile up so high because I just don't have the time. I have not had that vertigo symptom since I took this job. And my bank account looked a little better because they gave me more money. Oh my goodness. But yet I was hanging on to something because I thought that if I just hung on to that I will be promoted and I will have had control of that. What God is saying for those who may be hanging on to something, that there is something else. There is a ram in the bush that is much better. And you can live life even more productively as a result of it. And I'm not sure what that is for you. That was me for my job. But there's so much that we hang on to. Miss Sabrina was mentioning, we were going through a series with her about Sabbath and just piling in. And she's like, you got to release. There's some things to release because God will substitute it for something even better. So that is one of my favorite stories, and I just want to make sure I share that with you all. If anyone that's hanging on to anything, you feel that if you don't give it over to God, if you give it over to God, that He doesn't have a greater substitute, He does, because He wants better for you than you want for yourself. Another one of my, I'm done with this. One of my favorite stories is Exodus 17, 8 through 16. Again, it's Exodus 17, 8 through 16. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Yep, I skipped. It's Esther 4, and I'm sorry, Selena, or is it Germ who's reading? It's Esther 4, 1 through 17. Esther 4, 1 through 17.
Mordecai persuades Esther to help. When Mordecai learned of all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the city, wailing loudly and bitterly. But he went only as far as the king's gate, because no one clothed in sackcloth was allowed to enter it. In every province to which the edict and order of the king came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Many lay in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's eunuchs and female attendants came and told her about Mordecai, she was in great distress. She sent clothes for him to put on instead of the sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther summoned Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, assigned to attend her, and ordered him to find out what was troubling Mordecai and why. So Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city, in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him everything that had happened to him, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict for their annihilation, which had been published in Susa, to show to Esther and explain it to her. And he told him to instruct her to go into the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. Hathach went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, "All the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that they be put to death, unless the king extends the gold scepter to them and spare their lives. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king." When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer: "Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" When Esther sent this reply to Mordecai, "Go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions.
So again, I have a few notes I want to make sure I get through before I start talking about my life as a ministry leader. So obedience to his call is vital. It may even have the power to affect an entire generation of people. We may never be fully aware of how our actions and faithfulness to his voice work so powerfully in those around us. We don't have to stay stuck in fear. We don't need to run from his leading, even when we feel incredibly unprepared or inadequate for the job. He will equip us with every task and will pave the way for us to walk through with his power, providing grace for every step and covering us from behind. So Queen Esther had a choice. When Mordecai sent word to her about the great danger their people were facing, she could have simply tried to save herself. She could have kept quiet, just hope for the best, or turned the other way. But she and Mordecai both knew that God had given her great purpose in her position. She was wise, she made a plan, and didn't stay stuck in fear or worry. She prayed and fasted, and she asked for their people to do the same. She was willing to act, to follow God's lead, and to save the lives of her people, even if it meant she may lose hers. So through our current situations, and my situation may look different than what Esther faced, we might still be struggling with great fear or uncertainty. The future may look dark, or a hard diagnosis or recent loss may have sent us spiraling. Yet often God places us in positions of influence or in strategic locations with great purpose in mind. Many times the places where we find ourselves are not really all about us. It's about him. It's about his bigger plan. When I went down that dirt road and saw that church, I remember telling Aaron, "Let's turn around. I'm not sure if we're going down the right way because this is just looks a little different." But I remember Pastor Ron, it must have been a month after joining the church, asked me to lead the children's ministry. After the children's ministry, I did women's ministry. I've done D-Way cares, core track. Now I oversee some ministries. I also did D-Way-U, but we don't really have D-Way-U in existence anymore. But I remember Pastor Ron appointing elders, and I believe he did elders at the Harney Road. And I felt, oh, this is good. Of course, then I can definitely stay accountable. It must have been 2 or 3 months in after being an elder, I called them up. I'm like, I'm not sure if I want to do this. Because the elders, at that time, we had 2 services. So we had to show up for 2 services. Then we had the Bible study. We had a variety of things. And I just thought, this is so overwhelming. I'm not sure if I want to do all this. I felt that although I felt that I'm called for a time as this, that I probably wasn't capable. And I also thought in the back of my mind, if people see or know what may be happening in my household, how can I truly lead? Am I really the person who's called to do this? And he said, Bridgette, if you don't want to, but continue to be a ministry leader. And it's interesting, I was talking to Paula, and when she picked up the phone, she said, hi, Elder Bridgette, and people still say Elder Bridgette. And I just, I smile because I thought that I had put the title away. But I know that I need to be here because the people here, without Designer's Way, I don't know where I would be. So when we think about coming in on a Sunday morning, how you bless me, I'm hoping that I have been a blessing to others. Pastor Ron, we pray, I remember working so hard for for the women's ministry and having 4 people show up and just feeling disheartened. I remember being over children's ministry and getting worn out because I felt that's all I did. I barely came to church. We're usually taking care of the kids and just feeling overwhelmed. And again, telling God, I'm not sure if I want to do this. And he kept saying, you are prepared for such a time as this. The church needs you. People need you. Your ministries need you. During the pandemic, when I just had to kind of roll over and listen to the service and go back to sleep, and then we had to push myself to start, oh my goodness, and then we had to come back here, we got to put clothes on, and I shouldn't say I had clothes on. I'm sorry, that didn't sound right. That came out wrong. I apologize. But you know what I mean. Like Pastor Ron could be talking, I could be cooking, and he won't know the difference. And I remember pushing myself to head back out and thinking it was a chore. Because when I sit on that front row, I feel more accountable, and I don't want to be. And sometimes you get that in the back of your mind when you think you want to hold yourself back, but God has so much for you. I want to speak to the leaders this morning because I know that there's some in here who have not been in church in a while because they were probably back there with the kids. I want to speak to those who show up on a regular basis but feel a little overwhelmed because it is tiring, it is taxing, and we love what we do. Oh, we love what we do, but it definitely takes a toll on us sometimes. And I have been there. I have been there more than I can count. I've come in and I've sat on the front row and listened to a sermon, and I'm writing, and I have to intentionally write because I have so much on my mind, so much at home because I've come in here again, and I'm thinking Aaron's not here, or there's something going on with my daughters. We're empty nesters now. But the adult, I'm not sure if anyone we're not raising adults, but I wish I could put them back as kids because the things that they're going on. And so all that is on my mind. And I'm like, I have to come and do this again. But I love my church. I love when I sit through a baptism. And I love the people who register for baptism, but there's nothing that brings me more joy than pastor saying, is there anyone? And the people come in with their clothes on and say, I want to be saved. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm in the right place. I love when I sit through I'm so sorry, with Art, his prayer on Wednesdays, and just have him pray into me. Oh, yes. I love it when Pastor Ron's not necessarily leading a Bible study, and I hear Rosetta is sharing. And I'm like, I'm supposed to be here. I love it when I talk to my friend Tara, and she says, I'm back there with my little people, and Tara's over right, and I laugh all the time because I think how amazing she is. And I want you all to know that it is a struggle, and believe me, hands down, don't think when we walk in here, think, we got our makeup on, and that we are tired, but we're going to push through because we know that we are going to change lives, and that is our goal as ministry leaders. So if there's anyone that is sitting in here today, and I'm not saying you have to be a ministry leader, but sign up to serve. We need you to serve. Is there anyone that just come in and head out? And I know that I do the same. I run out the door, but at least, because I want to go get that nap. I was telling the leaders, was it last Sunday, that I was trying to think. I need to get caught up with Snowfall. I'm not supposed to be watching Snowfall, y'all. Anybody watch Snowfall? I'm not supposed to be watching Snowfall. Pastor Ron says what goes in. You need to. But I was saying I want to go home and watch the Snowfall because that's where I'm nice and snug. I just want to be in bed. But we are prepared for such a time as this. We are supposed to do the work of God. Designers Way need you. Everyone that's sitting in here, Designers Way need for you to sign up for the ministries. Designers Way need for you to fill this these seats. And if you're online and you're watching me, Designers Way need for you to come in and be in this church. There is nothing like being in the Spirit. Oh, God, I thank God for the men and women that sing here. I want to thank them because you don't know what Bernard and Joy and Alicia and what you all do to me on a Sunday morning. If it weren't for you all, I would be out of my mind. You don't know what you pour into me because I come sometimes empty, absolutely empty. And then I sit there and then they start singing. And I'm like, God, thank you. Thank you. Because they fill me up so much. I want the praise team to hear that. You know, I think about the people who were filming and they have to put it on social media, just all that. Thank you. Thank you. And for others, you know, I know you may be thinking, should I join? What should I do? We need you. We do need you. So again, as tired as we are here for such a time as this, and let's not give up. Let's keep the faith. So I don't really have a story for, I forgot that was up there, Paula. Thank you. This is actually about this. We went to San Francisco and saw these trees, and I remember thinking how firm and strong that they are, and reminding myself as I was thinking, you know, if I try not to stay within ministry and be moving back and forth, that I would never be as strong as this tree, that you're supposed to bloom where you're planted. I'm going to say it again. You need to bloom where you're planted. And I just remember seeing that and that reminding me of that. So thank you, Paula, for putting that up there. Thank you, sweetheart. So this is the last story. It's Exodus 17, 8 through 16. Exodus 17, 8 through 16.
The Amalekites defeated. The Amalekites came and attacked the Israelites at Rephidim. Moses said to Joshua, "Choose some of our men and go out to fight the Amalekites tomorrow. I will stand on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hands." So Joshua fought the Amalekites as Moses had ordered, and Moses, Aaron, and Hur went to the top of the hill. As long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning. But whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites were winning. When Moses' hands grew tired, they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. Aaron and Hur held his hands up, one on one side, one on the other, so that his hands remained steady until sunset. So Joshua overcame the Amalekite army with the sword. When the Lord said to Moses, "Write this on a scroll as something to be remembered, and make sure that Joshua hears it, because I will completely blot out the name of Amalek from heaven." Moses built an altar and called it, "The Lord is my banner." He said, because hands were lifted up against the throne of the Lord will be at war against the Amalekites from generation to generation.
Thank you. So I don't necessarily have a full story for this, and I know Art's going to come up and pray us out for this. But when I see this tightrope, I think of the balancing act that someone does and the balancing act that I have to do in my marriage or in ministry life or in my career. But I think it's an incredible story for two main reasons. So many of our daily fights won't be won with arguing and altercations, but through prayer and petitions to God. We know his power is greater than ours. We know his solutions are better than ours. We know his way is better than ours. Yet so often we put our daily fights into our own hands instead of his. Prayer places our fights where they belong, which is in his hands. And another thing is that we're not meant to do it alone. Even with Moses' direct connection to God, he still needed friends to help. When he was tired, they were by his side. When he was weak, they held him up, and when he was falling short in the battle, they jumped in to assist. And how often do we push people away when we're tired or when we're weak, or we run away when we're feeling short because of shame or pride? It is in these times that we need others by our side. We need people like that, and we need to be people like that for others. Helping others battle can be hard, it's strenuous, it's dirty work, but we must not shy away from it. Battle beside and with your brother and never against them. So I'm going to be turning 48 in January. And I'm sorry? 48. That's it? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm still a bit, okay. I feel old, right? So I'm turning 48, and I remember doing hang gliding, skydiving, and I flew this warbird. So those are the kind of things I do to try to be in the air. But when I hang glide, I am on one side, and the person who knows what he's doing is on the other. He's not going to put me up there. You know, that's his equipment, and it was probably the most beautiful feeling. Skydiving is tandem. So I'm on top, or was he on, I don't remember, I think he was underneath, but whatever, but I'm tied to someone. And when I flew the warbird, I was in the front, but of course the real pilot was behind me. So when I think about for God, how he wants to make sure that although we think we're in control, that we need him, and he's the one that holds us up. You know, there are times when I call friends and I say, please pray for me, because I can't, one time I called a friend. I was crying so much. All I said is pray, because I don't even know if I have the words. I need your support. And Tanya prayed me through that. I just want to make sure that you understand, when we think about the tightrope, when my marriage is like this and my career may be like this, I'm still not balanced. And when my children, or especially the way they acting now, my adult children are this, and my marriage may be feeling like it's better, I'm still not balanced. So what I do is that I try to assume the position of prayer. And I ask people to hold me up so that they can pray into me, and then I ask God to receive it. So every time I read the story, I think about Moses with his hand up. And that is the only way that we're able to get through. I don't know how, I always wonder, and whether, you're saved or not, how people do it without God, because, oh my gosh, I would have lost my mind. I absolutely would have. So I try to stay as balanced as possible. And I also think, as I do my little excursions on my birthdays, that as I trust those men to take me all the way up there where I could have fell, I probably need to trust God just as much. And he's holding me up. So I'm going to ask Brother Arthur to come up and pray. And while he prays, we're going to ask that you stand with your hand up and ask for receiving. Brother Arthur.